Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl, and I just wanted to post my thoughts on the game the other day and the exciting win we had against the New England Patriots. I wanted to wait to let the win really sink in, to really sort of figure out what that really was and what it really means going forward. Also wanted to wait until after last night's game too, to see how the Cowboys-Redskins game turned out. And here it turns out we are in a three-way tie with the Giants and Redskins for the top of the NFC East, and the Cowboys only a game back. So a bunch of average to below average teams fighting out for this division. So it's going to be an interesting last quarter of the season. But let's go ahead and think about the game with the Patriots. It's needless to say, it surprised me based on my prediction that I made. I obviously did not give the Eagles much of a chance in this one, but somehow they figured out how to win anyway. So let's really look at what happened there. Let's look at some stats to really figure out exactly what happened in this game that led to such an improbable victory of the Eagles over the Patriots. So if we look at the stats, first of all, some things really jump out at me. First downs, the Patriots had almost double the first downs that we had. Total yardage, they outgained us by almost 200 yards. In time of possession, they controlled the ball for almost 10 minutes more than we did. And all that leads then to one of the stats that I think obviously gets buried when you look at the final score, and that's the points scored by the offense, for 28 for New England versus 14 for the Eagles. All those things put together, you say, well, how exactly did the Eagles figure out how to win this game? And that's where some other stats I think really are a lot more telling. First of all, one of the things I talked about in my prediction video was sacks. The Patriots were the third best in the NFL in getting to the quarterback, and the Eagles did a really good job on the offensive line in protecting Bradford, giving him time to throw. He didn't have to make a lot of throws, but he made some important ones, and he completed them when they were really needed, and it shows in the sacks and the fact that the Eagles only gave up one, whereas Tom Brady was not comfortable. Some of that, I'm sure, was the fact that he didn't have his usual weapons that he's comfortable with. But the fact that the Eagles were able to get to Brady and keep him uncomfortable in the pocket all day shows up then in the 4 sacks. And then it also shows up in the next stat, turnovers, especially that one really important interception where Malcolm Jenkins returns it for a touchdown. They're in the red zone. They're at least going to score 3 points, and instead it's 7 the other way. So that's a 10-point turnaround right there, at a minimum, if not a 14-point turnaround. So if you look at those stats, I think it really shows that Brady was not comfortable. But one of the things that I usually do not overlook when I'm looking at predictions that I frankly did this past week, and that was special teams. And when you look at the return yardage, the Eagles significantly outgained the Patriots when it came to return yardage. This is kickoff returns, punt returns, and the interception return as well. But this stat that I have up now, the 249 to 72, that's even a little misleading, because if you take the kickoff returns out of the equation, it gets even more drastic. 214 return yards to 4 for the Patriots. That's punt returns and the interception return. So that's really where the difference in this game ended up being. The fact that the Eagles were really able to make big plays on defense and special teams, and if you're going to beat a team like the Patriots, that's the way you're going to have to do it. Speaking of special teams, we also need to talk about the curious decision by Bill Belichick to do the pooch punt kickoff after their second touchdown, which really seemed like an odd decision for a team like the Patriots to do against a team that at that point they were pretty much beating rather easily. It was 14-0 at that point. They had just gone up for the second touchdown, and it just made no sense for them to do something like that against a team like the Eagles that had been reeling over the last couple of weeks. They weren't a division rival, so it's not like it's something that they're trying to set up something for down the road or anything like that. So it really was sort of a strange decision for him to do, and a strange gamble really to take at that point in the game. And ultimately, I think it sort of jump-started the Eagles. I mean, that was one of the few drives that we got where we went down, took it down the field, and scored the touchdown to get it to 14-7 and make it more of a game again. So he was asked about that, I know, in the press conference afterwards, and he didn't really want to talk about it because I think he knows that it was a mistake. So where does this leave us? Let's take a look at sort of what ended up happening in this game from as far as where do we go from here. One of the things that I found really curious was how Chip Kelly used the running backs. The running backs were not used the way you would have thought they would have been used. You would have thought DeMarco Murray would have gotten a lot more usage. That was another thing I talked about in my in my prediction video, was expecting him to really need to have a big game if we were going to win. And he was really sort of a side note. And Darren Sproles really ended up being the running back that carried a lot of the load. And even Barner ended up with more carries than DeMarco Murray did. Obviously, it came out in the news today that he's apparently not happy about that, and talked to Jeffrey Lurie about that. But frankly, I think it's the fact he's underperformed. So if he wants to complain about not getting the percentage of carries that he thought he was going to get, I think he needs to look in the mirror as to really what happened and why he's not getting that. The other thing that's sort of interesting coming out of this was the wide receivers. They've sort of also have underperformed this year, and I think Chip Kelly sort of made a statement with that by sitting Miles Austin for this game and then releasing him afterwards. I think he's basically telling the veterans, listen, it's time for you to perform or you're out of here, and he'd rather give one of the kids a shot. So you bring up the rookie, and he doesn't have a breakout game by any stretch of the imagination, but he certainly had a better game than Miles Austin did sitting on the bench. So that's one of those things that I think that maybe Chip Kelly was trying to get a message to his team. Maybe they picked up on that. But I think we really need to talk about the offensive line, because the offensive line had a great game. One of the things I had talked about in the pregame, obviously, was the sacks that New England was getting, and they really gave the protection to Bradford when he needed it, and they were able to open up those holes for Sproles to get those gains. Like I said, the Eagles' offense wasn't outstanding from a points perspective, but they moved the ball when they needed to, and they were able to get drives when they needed to, and really keep sort of the momentum away from the Patriots anytime that they were trying to get something going. So I think that was really critical. So where do we go from here? The sort of the NFC least, as we should probably call them. There's 4 teams, obviously, all right there. 3 tied at 5-7, and the Cowboys at 4-8. Any one of them could win this thing. I'll try and do a prediction video later in the week looking at the Bills game, but then also looking at all 4 teams and their last 4 games as we enter the last quarter of the season. And we'll sort of see where things go from here and what's going to end up happening with this team, and whether or not the Eagles could actually figure out a way to win this division. At this point, they could end up anywhere from 5-11 to 9-7. Anything on those extremes or anything in between would not surprise me because of the way this team has been and how inconsistent it's been. So at this point, we're in the final stretch, and we'll see how it goes. Like I said, I'll check in later this week ahead of the Bills game. But for now, as always, fly Eagles fly.